Hello everyone, it's good to be with you again. Just in case you've forgotten my name's Peter and I'm the vicar, that's the Christian minister at the local church just by the school here, which is also called St. Peter's. I hope you're keeping happy and healthy and that you're managing to learn lots of wonderful things, whether you're in the school building or whether you're sat at home doing your school learning. It's a bit tricky and a bit different at the moment, isn't it? But we've still got lots of great things we can learn and lots of fun we can have together as well. Well, today I want to tell you a story. This story is about somebody who's very dignified. Have you ever heard that word before? Can you think of people who are dignified? Sometimes we're not quite sure what a word means, but we can think of people that describe it, can't we? So, who's dignified? An important person. Important people can be dignified, can't they? Or what about your teachers? Do you think they're dignified? Famous people might be dignified, but not always. Dignitaries. They've got the word in their name, haven't they? A dignitary is someone who represents an important person. I know, even better. A royal person, a king. A king's dignified, or a prince or a princess. Our queen, isn't she dignified? And it's that story I want to tell you about. A story about a queen. Not our queen, though. A queen that lived a long, long time ago in a country far away. This story comes from the Bible, the first part of the Bible that we sometimes call the Old Testament. That's the bit written before Jesus was born. And it's a story about an amazing woman who was really dignified, called Esther. Now, a long time ago, in a place far away called Persia, there lived a young girl called Esther, whose name means star. Now, Esther lived with a member of her family who looked after her because her mum and dad weren't around anymore, and his name was Mordecai. Now, Mordecai was a very good man and he loved Esther very, very much. Now, Mordecai and Esther didn't come from Persia. They came from a different country. They were Jewish. Not only the country they came from, but the things they believed. They believed in the God of the Bible. It was a bit different from what other people in their country thought all the way back then. So they were happy together, even though life was a bit tricky sometimes. But in that place, there was a king. His name was Xerxes. Now, most of the time, Xerxes was a good king, but he got very cross. And one day, he said to his queen, "Come and see me." And the queen said, "No." And the king got so cross, he said she wasn't allowed to be the queen anymore, and got rid of her. Now, back then, you couldn't be a king and not have a queen, so he needed to find a new queen. And so they went and found girls from Persia to come and see which one was going to be the next queen. And of all the girls, guess which girl got chosen to come and see the king? You're right, it was Esther. But do you know, she wasn't allowed to just go in what she was wearing. She had to be made to look dignified first. And so they went and they gave her special baths and they put face packs on her and made her skin look all beautiful, and lotions and perfumes and mascara and lipstick and all the things to make her look beautiful. And do you know how long it took her to get ready? It wasn't an hour, much longer. No, not a day either, even longer than that. Not a week, no, not a month, even more, a year. A year to make her look beautiful to see the king. Well, after a year of baths and potions and lotions and makeup and beautiful dresses, her and the other girls went to see the king, and King Xerxes picked the girl he wanted to be his queen. And you've got it. That was Esther too. Esther became the queen of all of Persia. Isn't that amazing? An ordinary girl became queen of a really big country. Now, the man that looked after Esther, do you remember his name? It was Mordecai. Mordecai was a really good man. He was kind and he was loving and he loved to do what was right. And so one day he was walking by the palace and he listened to two guards. They were whispering. They were making a plot to kill the king. What was Mordecai to do? What do you think you would do? He could keep quiet, couldn't he? Is that a good idea? No. He had to tell somebody, but he didn't want to cause a big fuss. And so he made sure to get the message to the king that the guards were out to get him. But he didn't tell the king who he was. And so the king's life was saved. Mordecai was a hero, but nobody knew it. Well, also working with the king was a man called Haman. Haman was the second in charge. He was a bit like the prime minister of Persia. Now, Haman thought he was very dignified and that people should treat him as such. And so as he walked down the road, he told people they have to bow down to him. And as he walked down the road, people bowed down to him until he walked past Mordecai. Mordecai would not bow down to Haman. This made Haman so angry. And so he decided he was going to go to the king and tell lies. He went to the king and said, "Your Majesty, there are some people living in your land who are nasty and mean, and they want everyone to not follow you as king. They're called the Jewish people, Your Majesty, and you should put out a rule that they all should be killed." Well, the king thought for a minute and he thought, well, if there's people out to kill me, well, then I should stop them. And so he agreed and he signed a special piece of paper to make it law that anyone who was Jewish, if they were found out, would be killed. That's not a good rule at all, is it? And does it sound very dignified to you? Doesn't sound like the sort of thing a dignified person would do to me. Well, do you remember who the queen was? And do you remember where the queen was from? That's right, it was Esther, and she was Jewish, and so she was in big trouble. And do you remember who looked after Esther and where he was from? That's right, it's Mordecai, and he was Jewish too, so he was in big trouble. But Mordecai was good, and Mordecai was loving, and Mordecai was clever. And so he got a message to Queen Esther and said, "Esther, God has put you here for this reason. Go and tell the king what's happening. Make it stop." Now, the rule back then was if you went in front of the king and the king hadn't asked you, he was allowed to chop off your head. So Esther was worried. What if I go to the king and he won't want me there? But she took a deep breath. She said a prayer, asking God to help her. She sucked up all of her dignity and she went to see the king. "Your Majesty," she said, "please may I see you?" Well, Esther was really pleased because the king was really happy to see her. "Esther, my queen, come on in. What can I do for you?" I wondered whether you would come for dinner with me, Your Majesty. Please, could I put on a feast for you and for Haman?" Well, the king said yes. And so Esther put on a beautiful dinner for the king and for Haman, and they were both happy. At the end of dinner, Esther said, "Your Majesty, would you please come for another dinner?" Well, the king, of course he would. He loved seeing his queen and he loved the delicious dinner. And so the king and Haman and Esther had a second dinner together. At the end of that delicious dinner, she said, please, king, would you please come for another feast tomorrow? Of course I will, says the king, rubbing his tummy and licking his lips. He loved Esther's food. And so the next night, him and Haman and Esther had delicious dinner together. At the end of the evening, the king was so full and so happy, he said to Esther, Esther asked me for anything, up to half of all the kingdom of Persia, and I will give it to you. Just name it and it is yours. And the queen looked sad. There's a law. Someone is out to try and kill me. Please stop them. Who? Who is trying to kill you? Said the king. And Esther pointed at Haman. He is, your majesty. He made you sign a law that Jewish people had to be killed, and I'm a Jewish person, and my family and my friends. Please don't do this. The king was furious at Haman. He called in the guards and made them take Haman away and to punish him for all the things he had done. But the queen, well, he loved her, and so he signed a new rule that no longer will the Jewish people be against the law, but instead they'd be celebrated. The queen was celebrated in Persia, and Mordecai was brought in before the king, because he had heard one night when he couldn't sleep that not only was he a good man, but he had saved his life. And so the king celebrated him and gave him robes and gave him riches and gave him Haman's old job. So now we have Queen Esther and Prime Minister Mordecai. So what do you think, boys and girls? Who was it that acted with dignity? Was it wicked Haman, who thought he was important and powerful, but was mean and did evil things? No, I don't think it was him either. Or do you think it was Queen Esther, who loved God and loved her family and loved her people and was brave and did what was right, even though it might have got her head chopped off? I think it was Esther too. You see, Esther was dignified not because of all the lotions and potions, all the lovely clothes, not because of the title she had as queen, because she lived in a way that showed that she respected herself and that she respected others, even when it was the hard thing to do. Christians believe that God teaches us the ways that is right, so we know what is good and what is bad. And Esther stood up for those things that God taught was right, to love people, to look after people, and to treat everybody the same, no matter what country they come from, even if it's a tricky thing to do. And so, boys and girls, what about you? Do you think you're dignified? I think God thinks you are. I think you can act in ways that are right, even if it's tricky, to stand up for what is good. Here's some ways you might be able to help. What if you hear somebody being mean to somebody else? What could you do? What if you're given some work to do at home and you know you can cheat? What should you do? You know that you're getting tired and grumpy and you want to shout at your family. What do you think you should do? What would it look like to act dignified boys and girls? What would it look like to listen to the good things God asks us to do? I wonder. I'm going to say a prayer now. And if you want to join in, you can say the special Amen with me at the end. But let's all sit nice and still and to listen to the words. Dear God, thank you that you treat us as important and with dignity. Thank you that you give us rules that help us know how to do what is right and how to avoid what is wrong. Thank you for Queen Esther, who acted with dignity and saved all those people. Help us to act with dignity and to show dignity to others too. And God, we pray too that you would be with us and keep us safe and happy at this time. Amen. I hope you have a brilliant week, boys and girls. And until I see you next time, remember, God made you special and he loves you very much. Bye.